My name is Isabella Martinez, 28 years old, and I just dropped the most shocking truth bomb at my sister's engagement dinner. When Dad asked about my wedding plans with that condescending smile, expecting me to admit I was still single and pathetic, I calmly announced that I had already gotten married. The silence that followed was deafening. What my family did not know was that this revelation would uncover a web of lies, betrayals, and stolen dreams that would tear our perfect facade apart forever. Before we dive into this family drama that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty and blood ties, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever felt like the black sheep of your family, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you will want to see how this revenge story unfolds and how karma finally caught up with everyone who wronged me. Let me paint you a picture of my family dynamic. My younger sister Victoria has always been the golden child. At 25, she graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, landed a six-figure job at a prestigious consulting firm, and somehow managed to snag Marcus Wellington, heir to a tech empire worth hundreds of millions. Everything Victoria touched turned to gold, while I seemed cursed to live in her shadow. Growing up, our parents never tried to hide their favoritism. Victoria got the designer clothes while I shopped at thrift stores. She received a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday while I inherited Dad's rusty pickup truck when I turned 18. When college application time came around, they hired expensive tutors and consultants for Victoria while telling me I should be grateful for any state school that would accept me. The worst part was not the material differences, but the emotional neglect. Every family dinner became a Victoria appreciation session. Mom would gush about Victoria's latest achievements while barely acknowledging my presence. Dad would beam with pride talking about his successful daughter, completely forgetting he had two. I learned early that love in our household was conditional, based on performance and success rather than simply existing. Victoria played her part perfectly, too. She would feign concern for my feelings while subtly undermining me at every opportunity. When I brought home a boyfriend, she would flirt just enough to make him question his choice. When I got excited about a job opportunity, she would casually mention how she heard the company was struggling financially. She mastered the art of supportive sabotage, always maintaining plausible deniability. The engagement dinner was supposed to be another celebration of Victoria's perfect life. Our parents had reserved the private dining room at the most expensive restaurant in town. Extended family flew in from across the country to witness the announcement of what Mom called the wedding of the century. Everyone knew Marcus was going to propose, but Victoria acted surprised when he got down on one knee with a ring that probably cost more than most people's houses. As champagne flowed and congratulations poured in, I sat quietly at the end of the table, invisible as usual. That is when Dad made his comment about Victoria's perfect wedding plans, then turned to me with that familiar look of disappointment mixed with pity. He asked when my turn would come, and I could see the assumption in his eyes that I would never measure up to my sister's success. What nobody knew was that 6 months earlier, I had quietly eloped with James Mitchell, a brilliant software engineer I met at a coffee shop near my apartment. James saw me for who I truly was, not as Victoria's lesser sibling. Our relationship developed naturally, built on genuine connection rather than social status or family approval. When we decided to get married, we chose a simple courthouse ceremony followed by an intimate dinner with just our closest friends. James understood why I had not told my family about our relationship. He witnessed firsthand how they treated me during the few family gatherings he attended as my friend. He saw the way they dismissed my opinions, interrupted me mid-sentence, and redirected conversations back to Victoria's accomplishments. He was appalled by their behavior, but I begged him not to cause a scene. I was not ready for that confrontation yet. But sitting at that engagement dinner, watching my family fawn over Victoria while treating me like an afterthought, something inside me snapped. When Dad asked his condescending question about my wedding prospects, I decided it was time to stop hiding my happiness. I looked him straight in the eye and delivered my bombshell with calm confidence. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Dad's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. Mom's mouth fell open in shock. Victoria's perfectly applied makeup could not hide the flash of panic that crossed her face. The extended family members stopped their conversations mid-sentence, creating an awkward silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. "You are married," Mom finally managed to whisper, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. 6 months now, I replied calmly, pulling out my phone to show them the simple gold band I had been hiding by wearing it on my right hand. We had a beautiful ceremony. Small, intimate, perfect for us. Victoria was the first to recover from the shock. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded, her voice carrying that familiar edge of accusation. "How could you keep something so important secret from your own family?" I looked around the table at their faces, seeing hurt, confusion, and anger, but notably absent was any genuine happiness for me. That told me everything I needed to know about whether I had made the right choice in keeping my marriage private. "I kept it secret," I said slowly, "because I knew this exact reaction would happen. You were more upset about being excluded than you were happy about my happiness." The truth of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the celebratory atmosphere they had worked so hard to create. The aftermath of my announcement was even worse than I had anticipated. Instead of asking about my husband, my happiness, or my future plans, my family launched into a full-scale interrogation about why I had deliberately excluded them from such an important milestone. Dad accused me of being selfish and vindictive. Mom cried about how I had robbed her of the joy of planning her daughter's wedding. Victoria, true to form, made it about herself by claiming my secret marriage had somehow tarnished her engagement announcement. The ride home that night was silent and tense. James picked me up from the restaurant, taking one look at my face and understanding immediately that the revelation had not gone well. He did not press for details, instead simply holding my hand as we drove through the city streets. That quiet support meant more to me than any dramatic reaction from my family ever could. Over the following days, the family drama escalated through a series of increasingly hostile text messages and phone calls. Mom left voicemails alternating between guilt trips and demands for explanations. Dad sent lengthy emails outlining all the ways I had disappointed him throughout my life, using my secret marriage as the latest evidence of my character flaws. Victoria, meanwhile, began a subtle campaign to turn our extended family against me, painting me as jealous and attention-seeking. But it was during one of these family confrontations that I discovered something that changed everything. While arguing with Mom about my betrayal, she let slip a comment that stopped me cold. She mentioned how Victoria had been so helpful in making sure I did not ruin things for myself by making poor choices in men. When I pressed for details, Mom clammed up, realizing she had said too much. That night, I could not sleep. Mom's comment kept replaying in my mind, and suddenly a pattern began emerging from years of seemingly disconnected incidents. Every relationship I had tried to build had somehow fallen apart in similar ways. Boyfriends would suddenly become distant after family gatherings. Job opportunities would mysteriously evaporate after I mentioned them at family dinners. Social connections would cool off after Victoria entered the picture. I started making calls the next morning, reaching out to ex-boyfriends I had not spoken to in years. The conversations were awkward at first, but as I carefully probed about why our relationships had ended, a disturbing picture began to emerge. 3 different men told variations of the same story. Victoria had approached them privately, expressing concern about my mental health and emotional stability. She would share fabricated stories about my past, plant seeds of doubt about my character, and position herself as the caring sister trying to protect them from making a terrible mistake. The most damaging revelation came from David, someone I had genuinely cared about 2 years earlier. He admitted that Victoria had shown him fake text messages supposedly from me, messages that painted me as obsessive and unstable. She had convinced him that I was dangerous and that he should end things immediately for his own safety. He apologized profusely, explaining that he had believed Victoria because she was my sister and seemed genuinely concerned for both of us. But Victoria's sabotage went beyond romantic relationships. I discovered she had also interfered with professional opportunities, using her business school connections to spread rumors about my work ethic and reliability. She had contacted potential employers, posing as a concerned reference, to plant doubts about my qualifications. Every career setback I had attributed to bad luck or poor timing was actually the result of my sister's deliberate sabotage. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. For years, I had blamed myself for my inability to maintain relationships and advance professionally. I had internalized my family's narrative that I was somehow defective, that Victoria's success highlighted my own inadequacies. Now I understood that my failures were not personal shortcomings, but the result of systematic sabotage by the person I had trusted most. James found me that evening sitting on our apartment floor, surrounded by old photos and letters, trying to piece together the full scope of Victoria's betrayal. When I explained what I had discovered, his reaction was swift and decisive. He wanted to confront my family immediately, to expose Victoria's actions and demand accountability. But I stopped him. "This requires strategy, not emotion," I told him. "Victoria has spent years perfecting her image as the perfect daughter and sister. A direct confrontation will just make me look jealous and vindictive. I need proof, documentation, something undeniable." Over the next several weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I reached out to former colleagues, old friends, and anyone else who might have been affected by Victoria's interference. I saved screenshots of social media interactions, documented phone calls, and created a timeline of suspicious incidents. The picture that emerged was of a systematic campaign designed to isolate me and ensure that I could never threaten Victoria's position as the family favorite. The most shocking discovery came when I contacted Maria Santos, a former coworker who had abruptly ended our friendship 3 years earlier. Maria initially did not want to talk, but eventually she broke down and admitted that Victoria had convinced her that I had been spreading malicious rumors about her personal life. Victoria had fabricated an entire narrative about my supposed jealousy and vindictive nature, providing fake evidence to support her claims. "I am so sorry, Isabella," Maria sobbed over the phone. "I should have come to you directly instead of believing her. But she seemed so sincere, so worried about you. I thought I was protecting myself from drama." As I compiled evidence of Victoria's sabotage, I also began to understand the deeper psychology behind her actions. She had not just been competing with me for our parents' attention, she had been systematically eliminating any possibility that I might achieve independent happiness or success. Every relationship she destroyed, every opportunity she sabotaged, was designed to keep me dependent on family approval that would never come. The realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it meant that someone I loved had deliberately and methodically destroyed years of my life. Liberating because it meant that my struggles were not due to personal failings, but to external sabotage that could be overcome. James watched this transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern. He supported my quest for truth, but worried about the emotional toll of uncovering such extensive betrayal. "What are you planning to do with all this information?" he asked one evening as I organized my evidence files. I looked up at him, feeling a clarity I had not experienced in years. "I am going to make sure that Victoria faces consequences for what she has done. And I am going to make sure our family understands exactly who their perfect daughter really is." The hardest part about building my case against Victoria was maintaining normal family interactions while secretly documenting years of sabotage. The upcoming wedding preparations provided the perfect cover for my investigation. As the maid of honor, I was expected to be involved in planning events and coordinating with vendors, which gave me legitimate reasons to ask questions and dig into details. My first major breakthrough came through Victoria's own carelessness. During a bridesmaid dress fitting, I overheard her on the phone with someone, discussing damage control regarding my surprise marriage announcement. She was speaking in hushed tones, but I caught enough to understand that she was worried about how my independent happiness might affect her carefully cultivated image as the superior sister. I started recording these conversations on my phone, being careful to stay within legal boundaries while gathering evidence of her ongoing manipulation tactics. Victoria had become so confident in her abilities to control narratives that she had grown sloppy, speaking more freely than she should have around family members she considered beneath her notice. The breakthrough I really needed came from an unexpected source, Marcus himself. During one of the wedding planning sessions, he pulled me aside and expressed genuine confusion about something Victoria had told him about my past. She had apparently shared stories about my supposed emotional instability and history of destructive relationships, painting me as someone he should be wary of for his own protection. "The thing is," Marcus said, looking genuinely troubled, "none of what she told me matches the person I see when we interact. You seem perfectly normal, actually really grounded and thoughtful." It made me wonder if there was some kind of misunderstanding. This was my opening. Instead of immediately defending myself or attacking Victoria, I took a more strategic approach. I expressed surprise at Victoria's concerns and suggested that perhaps there had been some miscommunication over the years. I planted seeds of doubt without making direct accusations, allowing Marcus to draw his own conclusions about the inconsistencies he was noticing. "Would you be willing to help me understand what specifically Victoria shared with you?" I asked carefully. I would hate for there to be misunderstandings affecting family relationships, especially with the wedding coming up. Marcus proved to be more observant than I had given him credit for. Over several conversations, he revealed that Victoria had shared numerous stories about my supposed character flaws, many of which directly contradicted evidence he could see with his own eyes. More importantly, he admitted that some of Victoria's stories about me had changed over time, becoming more dramatic and damaging with each telling. Armed with Marcus's observations, I began reaching out to other family members who might have been fed similar narratives about my character. My cousin Jennifer, who had always been close to our family, initially seemed reluctant to discuss Victoria's comments about me. But when I approached the conversation from the angle of family unity and wedding preparation harmony, she began to open up. "Victoria did mention that you had some challenges with relationships and job stability," Jennifer admitted during a coffee meeting. "But honestly, I never really understood what she was talking about. You have always seemed fine to me, maybe just quieter than her." I realized that Victoria's campaign against me had been more extensive than even I had imagined. She had been systematically poisoning family relationships for years, creating a network of people who viewed me through the lens of her fabricated narratives. The wedding planning period was giving me unprecedented access to these family members, allowing me to document the scope of her manipulation. My investigation took a crucial turn when I decided to reach out to Victoria's college roommate, Sarah Chin, someone I had met briefly at family gatherings but never really gotten to know. Sarah had moved across the country after graduation, so she was not involved in the current wedding drama, which made her a potentially objective source of information. The conversation with Sarah was enlightening in ways I had not expected. She revealed that Victoria had displayed similar manipulative behaviors during college, systematically undermining roommates and classmates who she perceived as threats to her academic or social standing. Sarah described incidents where Victoria had sabotaged group projects, spread rumors about romantic relationships, and even stolen credit for other students' work. "I always wondered if she continued those patterns after college," Sarah admitted during our video call. Victoria was brilliant and charming, but there was something calculating about the way she approached relationships. Everything was strategic, designed to benefit her position. More importantly, Sarah was willing to provide written testimony about Victoria's college behavior patterns. She had kept detailed journals during that period and could provide specific dates and incidents that demonstrated a consistent pattern of manipulation and sabotage. This historical evidence was crucial for establishing that Victoria's treatment of me was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader behavioral pattern. As I compiled more evidence, I also began documenting the current wedding planning process, noting how Victoria continued to undermine me even during supposedly collaborative activities. She would assign me menial tasks while giving more prestigious responsibilities to other bridesmaids. She made disparaging comments about my contributions in front of vendors and family members. She even attempted to exclude me from important planning meetings, claiming she was trying to reduce my stress levels. The most damaging evidence came when I discovered that Victoria had been actively working to exclude James from wedding events. She had told other family members that my husband was antisocial and potentially disruptive, suggesting that it would be better for everyone if he did not attend certain pre-wedding gatherings. Several relatives confirmed that Victoria had approached them privately to express these concerns, always framing her comments as worry for family harmony rather than personal animosity. James proved to be an invaluable ally in gathering evidence. His background in software engineering meant he understood the importance of documenting digital communications and maintaining organized records. He helped me create secure backup systems for all the evidence we were collecting and even provided technical assistance in recovering deleted messages and social media interactions. But the most unexpected ally emerged from within my own extended family. My Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, had always been somewhat skeptical of Victoria's perfection. During a private conversation at a family barbecue, he admitted that he had noticed inconsistencies in Victoria's stories about me over the years. "Your sister has always been very strategic in how she presents information," Robert said carefully. "I have worked in corporate environments long enough to recognize when someone is managing narratives rather than simply sharing facts." Uncle Robert's observations provided crucial validation from within the family structure. He had noticed Victoria's manipulation tactics, but had not spoken up because he assumed it was just typical sibling rivalry. When I showed him some of the evidence I had gathered, his reaction was one of genuine shock and anger. "This is not sibling rivalry," he said firmly. "This is systematic emotional abuse. Your parents need to understand what has really been happening here." With Uncle Robert's support, I felt confident enough to begin planning the final phase of my strategy. The evidence I had gathered painted a clear picture of years of deliberate sabotage and manipulation. The question now was how and when to present this information for maximum impact. The wedding provided the perfect opportunity. Victoria had worked so hard to create the image of a perfect family celebrating her perfect relationship. She had invested enormous energy in maintaining her reputation as the ideal daughter and sister. The cognitive dissonance of having her true character exposed during her moment of triumph would be devastating to her carefully constructed identity. But I knew I needed to be strategic about timing and presentation. A direct confrontation would allow Victoria to deflect and manipulate the narrative. Instead, I needed to create a situation where the evidence could speak for itself, where her own actions and words would reveal her true character to our entire family simultaneously. The plan that began forming in my mind was audacious and risky, but it felt proportional to the years of damage Victoria had inflicted on my life. She had spent decades systematically destroying my relationships and opportunities while positioning herself as the superior sibling. Now it was time for her to face the consequences of those choices in the most public and undeniable way possible. The rehearsal dinner was the perfect stage for my calculated revenge. Victoria had insisted on a lavish affair at the country club, with over 100 guests including extended family, college friends, and business associates. She had spent months orchestrating every detail to showcase her perfect life and perfect family. What she did not know was that I had spent those same months preparing to dismantle her carefully constructed facade. I arrived early to help with final preparations, my laptop bag discreetly containing a portable projector and speakers that James had helped me set up earlier. The audiovisual equipment was already integrated into the venue system, appearing to be part of the standard presentation setup for the evening's speeches. Victoria was too busy managing last-minute details to notice the additional components. The evening began exactly as Victoria had planned. Guests mingled over cocktails while she graciously accepted congratulations on her upcoming nuptials. Marcus's family shared stories about their courtship, and our parents beamed with pride as they introduced their successful daughter to anyone who would listen. I played my role perfectly, smiling and nodding while my stomach churned with anticipation. When the time came for speeches, Dad stood first to welcome everyone and express his joy about Victoria's engagement. Mom followed with a tearful tribute to her perfect daughter and future son-in-law. Several of Marcus's groomsmen shared humorous anecdotes about their friendship. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, exactly what Victoria had envisioned. Then it was my turn to speak as maid of honor. I stood slowly, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to unleash. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Victoria and Marcus, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. As Victoria's sister, I have had the unique privilege of watching her develop into the woman she is today. The audience settled into comfortable attention, expecting the typical sister of the bride speech about childhood memories and unconditional love. Victoria smiled confidently from her seat at the head table, completely unaware of what was coming. Victoria has always been incredibly strategic in her approach to relationships, I continued, clicking the first button on my remote control. The projection screen behind me illuminated with a carefully organized timeline of dates and events. She understands the importance of managing how others perceive her, and she has worked tirelessly to cultivate the image you all see tonight. A few guests shifted uncomfortably as they noticed the serious tone my speech was taking, but most remained focused on the screen, trying to understand the significance of the timeline I was displaying. What many of you do not know is that Victoria's success has come at a very specific cost. For years, she has systematically sabotaged my relationships, career opportunities, and personal happiness to ensure that she remained the favored daughter in our family. The room's energy shifted dramatically. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as guests realized this was not a traditional maid of honor speech. Victoria's smile faltered as she stared at the screen, recognizing some of the dates and incidents I was documenting. I clicked to the next slide, which displayed a series of text message screenshots. These are messages Victoria sent to my ex-boyfriend David, falsely claiming that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. She fabricated evidence to convince him to end our relationship because she viewed my happiness as a threat to her position as the family favorite. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, studying the evidence with the analytical mind that had made him successful in business. His expression was shifting from confusion to concern as he recognized the manipulation tactics I was describing. Victoria also interfered with my professional opportunities, I continued, advancing to slides that documented her sabotage of job applications and networking connections. She used her business school network to spread false information about my work ethic and reliability, ensuring that I would struggle professionally while she thrived. The silence in the room was deafening. Family members who had spent years viewing me as the unsuccessful sister were suddenly confronted with evidence that my struggles were not due to personal failings, but to deliberate sabotage. Uncle Robert nodded grimly from his table, his earlier suspicions now confirmed in the most public way possible. Victoria finally found her voice. "Isabella, what are you doing?" she demanded, her carefully controlled composure cracking under the weight of public exposure. "This is my rehearsal dinner. How dare you try to ruin this moment with these ridiculous accusations?" I looked directly at her, feeling a calm confidence I had never experienced before. "I am not trying to ruin anything, Victoria. I am simply sharing the truth about who you really are. The same truth you have spent years hiding behind manipulation and lies." I clicked to the final slide, which displayed a recording device icon. For those who might question the validity of my evidence, I also have audio recordings of Victoria discussing her damage control strategies regarding my marriage announcement and her ongoing efforts to manage family perceptions. The thread of audio evidence was enough to drain the color from Victoria's face. She knew exactly which conversations I might have recorded, and the implications of those recordings being shared publicly were devastating to her reputation. Marcus stood slowly, his voice carefully controlled. "Victoria, is what Isabella is saying true? Did you really sabotage her relationships and career opportunities?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Victoria looked around the room, seeing the doubt and suspicion in the faces of people who had always viewed her as beyond reproach. Her usual charm and deflection tactics were useless against documented evidence and recorded conversations. "Marcus, you know me," she said desperately, reaching for his hand. "You know I would never do anything malicious. Isabella has always been jealous of our success. This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior our family has had to deal with for years. But Marcus stepped back from her touch, his business training helping him recognize the deflection tactics she was attempting to use. That is not an answer to my question, Victoria. Did you or did you not sabotage your sister's relationships and career opportunities? The confrontation was creating exactly the kind of public accountability I had hoped to achieve. Victoria could no longer control the narrative or manipulate individual family members in private conversations. The entire room was witnessing her inability to provide honest answers about her behavior. Mom finally broke the tense silence. Isabella, surely you are exaggerating these incidents. Victoria would never deliberately hurt her own sister. We are family. I turned to address my mother directly, my voice steady and clear. That is exactly what I believed for years, Mom. I blamed myself for every failed relationship and missed opportunity because I could not imagine that my own sister would systematically sabotage my happiness. But the evidence is undeniable and multiple witnesses have confirmed Victoria's manipulation tactics. The room erupted in whispered conversations as guests began processing the implications of what they were witnessing. This was not a simple sibling dispute, but a revelation of years of calculated emotional abuse disguised as family dynamics. The explosion of whispered conversations and shocked gasps that followed my revelation created a chaos that Victoria could not control or contain. Her perfectly orchestrated evening was disintegrating in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop the collapse of her carefully constructed image. Marcus remained standing, his face a mask of controlled fury as he processed the implications of what he had just learned. Victoria, I need you to answer my question honestly. Right now, in front of everyone. Did you sabotage Isabella's relationships and career? Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. Years of maintaining her perfect facade under pressure had not prepared her for this moment of absolute exposure. You do not understand, she said, her voice rising to a near shriek. I was protecting our family. Isabella has always made poor choices. I was trying to prevent her from embarrassing us. The admission sent shockwaves through the room. Even Victoria's closest supporters could not ignore the fact that she had just confessed to years of sabotage while attempting to justify her actions. The cognitive dissonance was too great for anyone to overlook. Protecting the family by destroying your sister's happiness? Uncle Robert's voice cut through the murmur of shocked conversations. Victoria, what you are describing is not protection. It is systematic emotional abuse. Victoria whirled around to face him, her carefully applied makeup now streaked with tears of frustration and rage. You do not know what it has been like, carrying this family's reputation while she constantly threatened to drag us down with her poor judgment and unstable behavior. What unstable behavior? Marcus demanded, his voice sharp with growing anger. Isabella seems perfectly stable to me. She has a successful marriage, a steady career, and healthy relationships. The only instability I am seeing right now is your complete inability to take responsibility for your actions. The observation was devastating because it was so obviously true. Everyone in the room could see that Victoria was the one displaying erratic behavior while I remained calm and composed despite the emotional magnitude of the situation. Dad finally stood up, his face pale with shock and embarrassment. Victoria, these are very serious accusations your sister is making. If there is any truth to them, you need to explain yourself immediately. Dad, you cannot seriously be taking her side, Victoria pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. I am your successful daughter. I am the one who made you proud, who brought honor to this family. Isabella is just jealous because she could never measure up to what I have accomplished. The raw entitlement in Victoria's response was shocking even to family members who had enabled her behavior for years. She was essentially arguing that her success gave her the right to sabotage my happiness, that family love should be conditional on achievement and performance. Marcus stepped away from the head table, his decision clearly made. I cannot marry someone who would systematically destroy their own sister's happiness out of jealousy and selfishness. Victoria, our engagement is over. The announcement sent another wave of gasps through the room. Victoria stared at Marcus in disbelief, unable to process that her actions were having real consequences for her own life. For years, she had sabotaged my relationships without facing any personal repercussions. Now her own relationship was crumbling because of her exposed character. "Marcus, please," she begged, reaching for him again. "You cannot end our engagement over this. We are perfect together. We have everything planned. The wedding is in 3 weeks. All our friends and family are expecting us to be married." "Everything we had was built on lies," Marcus replied firmly. "You lied about your sister, you lied about your character, and you probably lied about other things I have not discovered yet. I cannot build a life with someone I cannot trust." The public nature of the breakup was adding another layer of humiliation to Victoria's downfall. All the people she had invited to witness her triumph were instead watching her life collapse in spectacular fashion. The country club staff stood frozen in the corners of the room, unsure whether to continue serving dinner or evacuate the guests. Mom began crying openly, finally understanding the magnitude of what had been happening in our family for years. "How could you do this to your own sister?" she asked Victoria through her tears. "How could we not see what was happening?" Victoria's response revealed the depth of her narcissism and entitlement. "I did what I had to do to protect this family's reputation. If Isabella had been allowed to make her own choices, she would have embarrassed all of us with her poor judgment and unstable relationships. The only embarrassment here is your behavior," Dad said quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I am ashamed that I raised a daughter who could treat her own sister so cruelly." The shift in family dynamics was immediate and irreversible. Years of favoritism and conditional love were being reevaluated in real time as everyone processed the true scope of Victoria's manipulation. The golden child who had brought them so much pride was revealed to be a calculating abuser who had systematically destroyed her sister's opportunities for happiness. Victoria looked around the room desperately, seeking any ally who might support her position or help her salvage the situation. But every face reflected shock, disappointment, or outright disgust at her revealed character. Even her college friends seemed horrified by the evidence of her manipulative behavior. Sarah Chin, who had flown in from California for the wedding, stood up slowly. "Victoria, I should have spoken up years ago about what I witnessed in college. Isabella, I am so sorry I did not warn your family about her behavior patterns back then." The additional testimony from someone who had known Victoria in a different context provided even more credibility to my accusations. It demonstrated that her abusive behavior was not limited to family relationships, but extended to anyone she perceived as a threat or competitor. As the evening devolved into chaos, with guests beginning to leave early and vendors packing up their equipment, Victoria made one final desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. She stood on a chair and addressed the room with the commanding presence that had always served her well in professional settings. "All of you are making a terrible mistake," she announced, her voice carrying the authority she had always used to manipulate situations. "Isabella has orchestrated this entire situation to ruin my wedding because she cannot stand to see me happy. She has always been jealous of my success, and this is her revenge for being the less accomplished sister." The accusation was so far removed from reality that it actually helped solidify everyone's understanding of Victoria's true character. The evidence I had presented was overwhelming and well-documented, while her defense relied entirely on personal attacks and deflection. Even people who had never questioned her behavior before could see the difference between factual documentation and desperate manipulation tactics. James appeared beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders in silent support. His presence reminded everyone that I was not the unsuccessful, unstable sister Victoria had portrayed me as, but a woman with a loving marriage and stable life that I had built despite her sabotage. The weeks following the rehearsal dinner revelation were a whirlwind of consequences and reckonings that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations for justice. Victoria's carefully constructed world continued to crumble as the truth about her behavior spread through our extended family and social networks. Marcus proved to be a man of integrity who followed through on his public declaration. He officially ended their engagement, returned the ring, and began the difficult process of canceling wedding arrangements. More importantly, He reached out to me personally to apologize for believing Victoria's lies about my character and to express his admiration for my courage in exposing the truth. I should have questioned the inconsistencies I was noticing, he told me during a private coffee meeting. Your sister is incredibly skilled at manipulation, but that does not excuse my failure to think critically about what she was telling me. The ripple effects extended far beyond just the canceled wedding. Victoria's professional reputation began suffering as word of her character spread through business networks. Several of her colleagues reached out to me, sharing stories of similar manipulative behavior they had witnessed in workplace settings. It became clear that her sabotage tactics were not limited to family relationships, but extended to anyone she viewed as competition. Mom and Dad struggled with guilt and shame as they processed years of enablement and favoritism that had allowed Victoria's behavior to flourish unchecked. Dad, in particular, seemed devastated by the realization that his conditional love had created a monster who would destroy her own sister's happiness for personal gain. We failed you so completely, Mom said during one of our first honest conversations in years. We were so blinded by Victoria's achievements that we ignored the person she was becoming underneath all that success. The family therapy sessions that followed were painful but necessary. Dr. Patricia Williams, our counselor, helped us navigate the complex dynamics that had allowed such systematic abuse to continue for so long. She explained how Victoria's narcissistic tendencies had been reinforced by our family's achievement-based love and lack of accountability for her behavior toward me. Victoria herself refused to participate in family therapy or acknowledge any wrongdoing. She maintained that she had been protecting the family reputation and that everyone was overreacting to normal sibling rivalry. Her inability to demonstrate genuine remorse or understanding of the harm she had caused made reconciliation impossible. The most satisfying aspect of the aftermath was watching Victoria face real consequences for her actions. Without Marcus's financial support and social connections, she struggled to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Her professional reputation suffered as stories of her personal behavior spread through business networks. Several former victims of her workplace manipulation came forward with their own experiences, creating a pattern that her employers could not ignore. James watched my healing process with patience and unconditional support that stood in stark contrast to the conditional love I had grown up with. Our marriage grew stronger as I learned to trust that his affection was not dependent on my achievements or performance. He celebrated my victories without comparing them to anyone else's success and supported me through difficult moments without judgment or conditions. You know what amazes me most about all this? He said one evening as we cooked dinner together in our apartment. You survived years of systematic sabotage and still managed to build a happy life. That takes incredible strength and resilience. Uncle Robert became an unexpected ally and mentor during the family reconstruction process. His corporate experience with toxic personalities helped him understand the psychological dynamics that had allowed Victoria's behavior to continue unchecked. He worked with my parents to establish new family communication patterns based on honesty and accountability rather than performance and favoritism. The extended family rallied around me in ways that were both surprising and healing. Cousins who had barely spoken to me for years reached out to apologize for believing Victoria's narratives about my character. Aunts and uncles shared their own observations about inconsistencies they had noticed, but never questioned. The family reunions that followed were awkward at first, but gradually became more genuine as we learned to interact without Victoria's manipulative influence. Perhaps the most unexpected development was the relationship I built with some of Victoria's former friends who had been witnesses to her college behavior. Sarah Chin became a close confidant who helped me understand that Victoria's actions were part of a consistent pattern rather than personal failings on my part. These new friendships filled gaps in my social network that had been created by years of sabotage. My career flourished once Victoria's interference was removed from the equation. Without her spreading false information about my reliability and work ethic, I was able to pursue opportunities that had previously been blocked. I received a promotion at work and began exploring entrepreneurial ventures that I had been afraid to attempt while struggling with manufactured professional setbacks. The wedding vendors who had witnessed the rehearsal dinner revelation became unexpected allies as well. Several of them reached out privately to share their own observations about Victoria's behavior during the planning process. The country club manager even offered to host a renewal ceremony for James and me at no charge, expressing admiration for my courage in exposing such systematic manipulation. Victoria eventually left town, claiming she needed a fresh start away from family drama. She relocated to another state where she could rebuild her reputation without the burden of people who knew about her true character. While part of me felt sad about the permanent fracture in our family, I also felt relief that I no longer had to guard against ongoing sabotage and manipulation. The most profound change was in my relationship with my parents. Without Victoria's constant presence as the favored child, they were forced to see me as an individual rather than as a disappointing comparison to their golden daughter. Dad began asking about my interests and opinions without immediately redirecting conversations to Victoria's achievements. Mom started including me in decision-making and social planning without treating my input as less valuable than Victoria's preferences. Family dinners became genuinely enjoyable for the first time in my adult life. Without Victoria's subtle put-downs and competitive atmosphere, conversations flowed naturally and everyone's contributions were valued equally. James was welcomed warmly into family gatherings, and his perspectives were sought out and respected rather than dismissed as outsider observations. The legal consultation I had with an attorney revealed that while Victoria's behavior was morally reprehensible, much of it did not rise to the level of criminal activity. However, the documentation I had gathered served as powerful evidence for establishing no-contact boundaries and protecting myself from future interference. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that exposing Victoria's true character was not just about getting revenge for years of sabotage. It was about reclaiming my own narrative and establishing my worth independent of family dynamics that had been toxic and damaging. The courage required to confront such systematic manipulation had revealed strengths I did not know I possessed. So here is my question for all of you watching. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was systematically sabotaging your happiness? How did you handle the revelation, and what advice would you give to others facing similar family betrayals? Share your stories in the comments below, because hearing about your experiences helps others realize they are not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it who might need to hear about standing up to family manipulation. Subscribe for more real-life drama stories about justice, karma, and finding the courage to expose toxic behavior. And share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar family situations, because sometimes people need to see that confronting systematic abuse is possible and necessary. Thank you for watching and supporting my journey toward healing and justice. Remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and competition. Sometimes the family you choose through marriage and friendship becomes more supportive than the family you were born into, and that is perfectly okay.